Hey everyone, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Future of Data Security. Today I'm speaking with Kate Helin, Legal Director, Privacy and Data Security at Snyk. Kate, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'd love it if we could start with maybe you sharing a little bit of your background and key experiences that led you to your current role. And really, when you wake up in the morning, what makes you passionate about data security and privacy?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's a big one. So a little bit about me. I was doing human capital systems implementation at the DoD. I had a mentor who was like, Kate, you really need to go to law school. And I was like, I really don't want to go to law school. And he led me sort of step by step down the path of going into law school. And before I knew it, I was sitting in my first 1L class. I knew when I went to law school that I wanted to go into business, and I already had a background sort of in data governance and systems implementation. So when I came out of law school, I went and did some private practice for a little while, learned a lot about contracts, learned a lot about just sort of the practical implications of what it means to be a legal professional. But when the opportunity arose to go in-house and focus on technology and systems, that was really my passion. I jumped at the opportunity. It's funny, I tell people who are interested in privacy or sort of, AI, right? Like the idea of an AI counsel is brand new. Relatively new, fairly new in the marketplace. So I tell people who want to become counsel for security, counsel for AI, or privacy counsel, which is sort of how I came to this role about 10 years ago now. You just have to ask good questions, and that's going to sort of lead you down the path of becoming this consultative persona that gets to lean in on really interesting, novel, and sticky, both legal and technical questions. But it's really just about asking good questions. It's funny, I became privacy counsel sort of at the advent of GDPR, which is, a lot of people sort of in my role had a fairly significant reckoning because of the size of the penalties and all of that sort of stuff when GDPR went into effect. Privacy counsel existed before that, but it was really focused around like the medical and financial institutions. GDPR was the first time it really became mainstream. There weren't a lot of privacy counsels at that time. So the people who became privacy counsels sort of came from corporate and IP, and they were just the people who were curious. And I'm seeing sort of the same thing around data security and AI counsel.
Sort of the people that were at the frontier of regulation and GDPR being the latest thing, and now they got dragged into what today is really the AI super cycle.
It's actually a natural progression for folks who sort of can't come from a privacy or IP background, because they have a tendency to lean really heavily into the technology. You want to understand the thing that's being regulated, hopefully. And so from that, there tends to be a natural curiosity that leads people into this space.
We're going to get to AI in a moment, the talk of the town, but how did leading GDPR implementation at Pendo and other companies prepared you for today's AI regulation challenges?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating question, honestly. I think that GDPR is a very, very complex regulation that when it was first passed had a lot of questions about exactly how it was going to be implemented. There was not a lot of regulation explaining what the law actually meant. And so there were people like me who were sort of sat in this seat of trying to figure out how to counsel their company to comply with this thing that sort of had a lot of gaps in it and a lot of questions about what certain things really meant, right? What does it mean to allow your data subject to have an access right? What does it mean to have a data processing addendum on every single one of your contracts? And those sorts of questions really allowed me and allowed sort of people sat in similar seats to think creatively about how we were going to solve the problem, how we were going to meet the expectations of the regulators and the spirit of the law, while trying to sort of understand exactly what the implementation details looked like. And we saw at that time a lot of sort of like cultural or community norms, like legal norms arise about how you do a DPA, that sort of stuff, that weren't necessarily written 100% into the law. And we saw after the fact a lot of regulation sort of following suit based on sort of what the community of legal practitioners were trending towards. And I think that it's very similar in the AI space and very similar in the data security, maybe a little less so in data security. Data security laws tend to be a bit more prescriptive, but this is where we do need to partner really closely as privacy and legal practitioners with our technical counterparts, right? Like I talk to our security folks every day because I need their help understanding how do we implement a control to meet this obligation. But I think that that's sort of how GDPR and privacy prepared me to take on sort of the newest challenges in the marketplace and the newest technological challenges, which today we all know is AI.
Do you feel that, generally speaking, there's a gap between what regulators mean or want and what they actually write in the law, and then the interpretation of that? It never spells out what specific solutions are supposed to address these, but all the vendors are saying, well, we're providing a solution for this. You know what I mean? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that it's really like a lot of times the laws aren't written sort of for the technology. I'm going to use an example that I personally find fascinating. So one of the things that we're seeing in particular in the privacy space is there's a lot of lawsuits happening around session replay and screen recording. And the way that they're actually the plaintiffs are pursuing these claims is by using wiretap laws. Laws are many years old, right? Like you think it's they were built or designed for technology where you pick up the phone and call someone. But now we're reinterpreting the law to think about how maybe a cookie on somebody's browser is actually intercepting a communication between the consumer and their browser window. So the laws as they are written, whether they're new or old, can leave a lot of room to sort of interpret how they apply to the technology. The technology is always going to change faster than the law. So in particular, when we think about AI, applying some of these existing concepts to the new technology is really where sort of the opportunity lies for people like me and our security partners, is sort of getting to that practical solution that meets the spirit of the law as closely as we can without sort of the prescriptive obligations being written down.
I think Europeans for data privacy were quite ahead of the curve with GDPR, and that led to other regulations like CCPA in the US, and it's probably a list of 30 others that were effectively a copy of GDPR. Concerning AI regulation, I hear often, there's no clarity. There's a divide between where the regulators should be and how fast, as you said, the technology is evolving. Can you paint a picture for us of where we're at? What's the state of affairs with AI regulation right now?
I think it's trying to catch up. If you think about sort of the regulation that's being passed right now and the laws that are being passed right now, they're really reactive. They're trying to catch up with sort of, in particular, the large language models and the generative models, and think about it from the lens of consumer protection and how we deal with individual rights versus these large companies and the large language models. But ultimately it's a catch-up game at the moment. The technology is going to continue to outpace the regulation.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have a take on this, but one thing I've been watching is obviously there's a huge competitiveness between the large language model providers, and it seems, frankly, a lot of them have just gratuitously, without any care for copyright infringement, ingested the whole internet. And obviously, the more data you have, the better your model is. And there's many litigations going on. There's a debate. Do you have any opinion on what's happening with the whole copyright issue for training LLMs?
I guess I don't have a legal opinion. I think my opinion or my response to that is more one of technological curiosity, which is like, the sort of classic example is the ability of the model to reproduce most of a Harry Potter book, right? Or if you prompt it properly, it'll reproduce a significant portion of one of the Harry Potter books. Fairly close to verbatim. Like, to me, it's sort of the technological curiosity and understanding of how it does that, as well as sort of thinking about these theoretical legal concepts, again, that were written eons ago and how they apply. So I wouldn't say I have an opinion in terms of how the debate should break out, but it's more of sort of an intellectual curiosity of thinking about how these these old concepts apply to these new technologies.
Coming back to data security and privacy at the intersection of emerging AI use cases and risk, one thing I see is a lot of enterprises, conceived of solutions. They're not even pilots anymore. They're actually great solutions that could improve their business, move the needle. But often these companies struggle to go to a full-scale deployment because they're highly regulated. They see a lot of risks with data loss through prompts, file uploads, a variety of other risks. Do you see the same thing? What are the key risks you're seeing in AI adoption right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny. Like I said, the technology is moving so fast. If I look at the counsel that I gave 12 months ago, I laugh at myself because the technology has evolved so much. I think that we are at a place where sort of the agent is going to become, or has already become, the biggest security risk in sort of most companies' tech stack. So thinking about how we secure an agentic future, it's a lot. So that's sort of the biggest risk that I see. I think that ultimately, when we think about addressing and mitigating those risks, it's always going to depend on your business and sort of your business's risk tolerance and that sort of thing. But I think that this is really where that partnership with other key stakeholders at the company comes into play, right? Like, I am not an agentic expert. I rely on the security and R&D technical folks within our teams to explain to me how the technology works. And it's my job to counsel them on sort of the shape of the law, and also sort of the shape of our contractual commitments and all of that sort of thing, so that when we are partnering to protect both our stack and our customers, frankly, we can think about these things holistically. It also brings into play our risk and compliance partners. So we really think that that's the time when you sit down and have sort of the round table of key stakeholders, because everybody's going to bring a perspective on the risk and how you mitigate it. Sometimes it'll be a technical control, sometimes it'll be a human control. It's never going to be perfect ultimately, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. In terms of use cases, I was looking at the Snyk's website, and obviously one of the most productive areas right now of AI is code generation and secure code generation. So I'm curious, what are some of the areas where you've seen AI really delivering value today? And where have you seen it maybe fail to meet expectations?
Ooh, that's a big question too. What we're seeing is a lot of the repetitive sort of tasks are able to be done fairly well by models, whether it's writing code or, helping me craft a Slack message or, fine tune a deck or whatever, right? Those are places where, and Frank, the other thing is, like, we use AI from a legal perspective to distill. I mean, you always have to have human in the loop, right? Like, there are at Snyk, we have a number of guidelines that we use to enforce sort of using AI responsibly. One of them is having a human in the loop. So having a human in the loop is obviously going to be really important, but I use AI all the time to help me distill complex legal concepts, and then I validate that that makes sense. So those are the types of tasks that I think we're seeing AI really thrive at. I don't know that we're going to see AI, and I guess this is sort of a question for the folks sort of more tech savvy than I am, but I wonder how much we're going to see AI be successful at sort of really solving those like novel, unique problems that we tend to think of requiring sort of human innovation. I sort of personally think of AI as like a workhorse to free up more brain space for additional human innovation.
It reminded me of something you said before the call. You said nothing is ever black or white. Everything's different shades of gray. Do you want to elaborate on that? And what do you mean by that in your philosophy when you approach data privacy and security?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it comes back to risk, and it also comes back to sort of what I was saying about the technology and the regulation of the laws not always marrying nicely. So, in my experience, I've rarely seen a situation where it's definitively a yes or no answer. It's all going to be a question of, okay, what's the business appetite? What kind of financial investment are we making? What kind of risk appetite do we have here? And how do we come up with a solution that best mitigates our most material risks, be it security, be it legal, be it financial, et cetera? I mean, even physical security, right? While also sort of balancing the needs of the business to be successful and in most cases go fast and compete in competitive markets, right? So how do you facilitate getting business done while mitigating an appropriate amount of risk? And it's very rarely ever one or the other. I think that that's where sort of those relationships and your key stakeholders come into play. You have to have that trusting relationship with those folks in order to get good information from them about the technical solutions available in order to counsel them and partner with them to find a good solution for your business.
You know, it won't be too long before the time where if we're scheduling a podcast, my AI agent will talk to your AI agent and something will happen. I think what you're trying to say is as we advance in this hyper AI centric, hyper accelerated world where it's frankly beyond human capacity, perhaps relationships matter more than anything else in a time like this.
Yeah, I mean, building relationships is one of the things that I think is most important, whether it's via Zoom or a call recording. I have colleagues that I work with across the ocean who I've never actually even met in person, but I have great relationships with them because ultimately I need them to trust me when I make a legal recommendation, and I need to trust them. But I mean, even just from a personal perspective, like, does anybody get a job by dropping a resume, right? Like it's about who you know. It's about the people. I mean, I have people that are in my network that I call on cuz folks in my seat are usually the only one at their company, right? So, do I have people in my network that I can call on and sort of bounce ideas against, understand sort of like how am I thinking about this right? It's just having those trusted advisors and those people that hopefully you can help them be successful, but they'll also help you be successful.
I'm curious, talking about trust and relationship, what's your philosophy on, recruiting the right people, building a killer team? What are some of the attributes, maybe the cultural elements that you feel are most important, especially nowadays where most of the things are happening remote in a very fast-paced world?
Yeah. So you hit on one of my passion projects. Actually, I think that building great teams is really, really important to being successful. I mean, you can't mitigate risk. You can't protect a business. You can't do those things without sort of trusted partners. I think that it's really important to allow people to bring their whole selves to work. I'm a mom. It means that I don't get a break from being a mom. So even as I sit here, I'm a mom. And so making sure that people feel empowered to be authentic in the challenges that they're facing, the things that they're balancing, and know that they are supported and give them challenging and engaging work while still respecting sort of their all the hats that they wear, I think is really foundational to building trust.
If you were to think back on your career coming from a very strong legal background, then moving into tech and having to develop an attitude to ask all the right questions. If you could give some pieces of advice to a younger self or someone that's new starting, what would be your sort of top advice?
It's funny. So when I mentor people, there are two things that I tell them. build relationships. I mean, it sounds kitschy, right? Like never go to lunch alone, but like never go, if you're interning somewhere, never go to lunch alone. Meet people, talk to them, understand how they approach their work, that sort of thing. The other thing is ask all the questions. Don't be afraid to ask a question. Don't be afraid to look silly. You may think you're going to look silly. You may even look silly, but like ask the question anyway. One of my sort of things that I play in my head is if you have the question, somebody else probably has the question. So the two things that I would say are build the relationship, get to know people, because it'll do nothing other than make you more empathetic and allow you to be more successful. And then ask the questions, because it shows a level of vulnerability and makes you smarter.
Things were much different when you started than they are today. Read a lot of articles myself, from Gartner, different sources that speak about the challenges of new professionals starting with unlimited intelligence at their fingertip, the era of almost free code. You could build anything you want. A lot of people think that's going to atrophy young people. They won't have the same exposure. What are your thoughts on the core challenges that the new generation will face as they enter the workforce?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. It's actually something that I've been rolling around in my own head again as I think about being a mom, but also young people coming into the profession. I almost liken it to like when we all learned how to use Google, right? Like, does Google make me any less intelligent? No, it's about how I ask the question of the search engine and then distill the results and all of that, right? Like we can't conceive of like a world in which we didn't Google something now, right? Like I plan my vacation, I Google things. I mean, not anymore. Now I use AI, but like that was sort of like, it was inconceivable that you wouldn't just search the internet. Whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing. So I think that I sort of think about AI similarly, right? Like it's not necessarily a crutch. It's more of an accelerator, right? The most successful people are going to be the people who know how to use the tools to their advantage and also push themselves to think creatively. So I just see it as another tool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When I was a teenager, if I wanted to learn about anything, I had to walk like 5 miles to go to the library.
Right.
Now you have so much information, it almost causes a reverse paradigm where you're bombarded with so much that you can't take it all in at once, right?
Yeah. But that's actually kind of what I use AI for. Like it sounds silly, but I was using Gemini the other day to help me with sort of an exercise routine, right? Because I could go and search and read 50 articles, but who has time for that? So instead, let me get the AI to go read these articles and help me come up with a solution. I mean, it's the same way that we use it in sort of legal and security, right? Like I don't have time necessarily to read every single authoritative thing on a subject. So let me get a distilled summarized version that then I can go fact check and make sure that it aligns with the primary sources and sort of my business's tolerance. But I think that that's actually an area where AI can help us rather than hurt us.
And briefly, just because I'm sure you'll have an opinion on this, how do you think the AI developments, we've seen Claude go squarely after legal profession, things like that. How is it going to evolve the legal profession? I hear that law firms are reducing the number of associates they're taking on as an example. Where do you think it's going?
I'm actually going to use engineers and a sort of like junior engineers and analogize them to associate lawyers. You don't get senior lawyers who are successful, just like you don't get senior engineers who are successful if they don't start as junior lawyers or junior engineers, right? Like just because the coding tool can write the code doesn't make it good, doesn't make it right. You still need to teach the new generation joining the workforce today how to discern what's good and what's not good, what's quality, what's secure, etc. Same thing with associate lawyers. You still need them to come in, even if you're using an output from an AI. You still need to teach them how to discern and distill that information and frankly apply it to whatever fact pattern, the business that you're counseling, etc. And if we don't do that, we're going to not have successful senior lawyers in the future. I think it sort of goes back to my point about Google being a tool, right? Like it's incumbent on us to teach people how to use the tools. I don't think that the tools are ever going to replace the people. Hopefully they just facilitate us having more brain space to do the creative problem solving.
Unfortunately, Kate, that's all the time we're going to have today. But before we wrap up, if people want to follow your work, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, just find me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect and chat. I'm always looking to learn about, as I said, relationships are everything. I'm always looking to learn about what other folks are problem solving, what other folks are stuck on, trade ideas, etc. So, or even just have a Zoom coffee or an in-person coffee if the time and location allows. So I'm always here to have a chat.
Fantastic. Well, it was great to have you on the show, Kate. Let's keep in touch, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.